Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Severin. I am your host. Today, we are going to be focusing on a solo episode where we'll talk about how to create a quarterly review, either for your own personal life or for your business, as long as you have goals to measure and are looking to understand what you accomplished in the year and how you can use that data to influence what you plan for next year. This episode is the one for you. So it's autumn here in Chicago, which means it's back to school, it's harvest time, and as we're heading into autumn, it also means that we are ending the third quarter of the year and beginning the last quarter of the year. For me, at the end of each quarter, in this case, September, I take 2 hours of my time to complete a personal and professional progress report. I use this time to reflect on the goals that I made at the beginning of the year and to gauge my progress so far. Then in November, I gather and reread the reports that I created for each quarter to create a plan for the following years. I've been using this process for 10 years now, and I'm always amazed by how much fun it is to be in tune with what you want in life and how rewarding it is to see those things come to be. So, the backstory for this process started years ago when I was a program manager at a nonprofit housed at Harvard University. In that position, the team and I launched countless of programs over several years. Before starting a new program, we created a program description, a plan to how to achieve our ends, and detailed the needed metrics to measure our success. Similarly, when we wrapped a project, we would do a project recap or a postmortem, as we used to say, to identify what worked, what didn't work, and what are the best practices we learned, and how do we need to, or if we need to pivot. Each quarter, we wrote a short internal report to summarize project updates. Now, these reports didn't necessarily need to go to anybody else. It was just a way for us to capture data, to capture information, so that it would inform what we do in the following year. So you can guess, I came to fall in love with strategic planning and even got a certificate in strategic planning at Harvard. You know, it was only a matter of time until your girls started implementing the same strategic process that I learned then into my own life. And here's why I use the fundamentals of strategic planning in my life. And I'm hoping you fall in love with this process too. I am an avid reader, and it's one of my greatest joys in life. Every once in a while, I love to pick up a romance novel. Why? Because at the end of the story, everyone's going to have a happy ending, or at least the main characters will have a happy ending. One day it just occurred to me, what if I could write my own happy ending? What if I could write what my goals are and figure out exactly how I can get to where I want to go, kind of like a book. So that's how I started, really. I would write out the results I would want in my life. Then I would just backtrack by creating a map to get what I wanted out of life so that I didn't necessarily meander off track. I'll give you 2 examples. One simple example is I love dinner parties and inviting people over and creating this elaborate dinner and cooking things that take hours. I don't know why exactly I'm that way, but I like to do complicated meals for my friends. And when you do a complicated meal, you have to marinate the protein overnight, and you have to just make sure that all of the steps are timed. in order to figure out how I would do, how I would get dinner on the table for my friends, I would just backtrack to, okay, if my friends are arriving at 6 o'clock, what do I need to have done? The table needs to be set, the wine needs to be chilled, and so on and so forth. So I would just go by each 30 minutes until I got to the point where I needed to marinate the protein, and that would be it. And a successful dinner would then be a foregone conclusion. A second example is how I came to go to graduate school. I found out when the application deadline was going to be. I worked backwards to when I needed to submit my application, when I needed to submit my letters of recommendation, when I needed to take the GRE, and so on and so forth. These are simplified answers, I know. It's very different to, building a company or creating a brand new portfolio, but some of the same tactics can be applied to thinking really, really big, such as getting published in a major magazine or writing a book. Now, I want to give you a metaphor. So imagine that you're going on a road trip. You start out knowing your destination and you figure out which route you'll take, and you make plans for pit stops and detours along the way. Heck, you might even put aside a bit of emergency money as a contingency plan in case things go awry. Steadily, despite pit stops or a detour here and there, you're bound to arrive at your destination. So in the same vein, a strategic plan helps me determine where I am in my journey. It helps me identify what's important. It helps me figure out the actions I need to take to get further along in my journey, and put in processes for accountability as well. Having a plan clears headspace for me so that my anxiety doesn't enjoy the spotlight at center stage. Rather, I focus on doing and executing on the things and the actions that are going to get me closer to what my goal is, as well as leaving room for fun and leaving room for excitement to happen and for detours as well. In November, I'll create another episode to walk you through how to do a personal plan. And the best thing to do before going on that journey actually is to conduct a review. If we're still using that road trip metaphor, if your car breaks down, you wouldn't simply open the hood and take out the gears and filters and you'll start unscrewing anything. Can you tell that I don't know much about cars? Anyway, so if your car breaks down, you'll either fix it or you'll call roadside assistance. And roadside assistant or a mechanic will likely do a diagnostic prior to fixing anything. I use the quarterly check-in in my business and in my personal life. And let me tell you a secret, my husband and I use it as well to keep our marriage on track. So the process is really magical, particularly since it makes you focus on the things that really matter. Since you're focusing on the things that matter, your success and the things that are important to you are a foregone conclusion, right? Are you excited? I'm so excited. Okay. Let's get into the nitty-gritty about the quarterly check-in itself. At the beginning of the year, I set a big, audacious goal, like something huge, but doable. And I use the quarterly check-in to stay on course. To start, I make the quarterly check-in as fun as possible because it's important for me to make my mind associate pleasure and newness and excitement with reviewing where I've been. I'll generally take myself to a lovely cafe or a restaurant or a sunny corner of my house, or even I'll do this while I am on vacation. I bring colored pencils, I bring notebooks, I bring a pad of paper, post-its. I bring a lot of different goodies because I never quite know where my mind will take me in terms of notes that I want to write for the future. And I start by reviewing the check-ins that I did for the first and for the second quarter. And the reason I do this is because a year goes by really quickly, but at the same time, it doesn't. What always happens is I always underestimate how much I actually get done. Sometimes I actually don't get much done. However, when I do go back and I list out my accomplishments through the review, it makes me realize that I'm a little too hard on myself, or it makes me realize, girl, you need to get your bum into gear. For the check-in, I asked myself 7 questions in total. And don't worry about taking notes on this as you maybe in the car or you're going on a walk or maybe you're washing dishes or doing laundry. I have a handy dandy download for you to check out in the show notes so you can download the worksheet that goes along with this with this episode. The first thing that I do, I go over what my goals were for the year. In very broad strokes, I wrote down my 3 goals. And those 3 goals could be anything from increase revenue by X%, collaborate on X number of photo shoots, and it could also be focusing on marketing in very specific ways so that I can increase my business and I can increase my client base. Regardless, though, I focus on 3 goals for the year. And why do I do that? Honestly, there's not really a good reason. I just keep going back to the KISSS method, keeping it simple, stupid. Because when you try to focus on too much, you get stressed out, you stretch your resources, and you dilute your efforts all around. So I found that 3 is a really good way to do it. And generally, I swear by the 3, and that's why we do 3. If you want to do more, if you tend to focus on more, certainly you can do more than 3 goals in the review. Okay, first we talk about what my goals were for the year, and the next thing I do is I list out the steps that I've taken to achieve my goal. It's great to have goals, but if you're not doing anything for them, if you're not doing anything to achieve the ends of your goal, then there's not really any point, is there? So this is the point where I list out the steps that I've taken. And it might be that in a quarter I've only worked on one thing. I've only taken 1 step. And in some quarters I've done everything. Rarely. It's only happened once. It's rare. But whatever it is that has happened in your year, be honest with yourself, because that's the whole point of this check-in with yourself. You have to be honest, because that honesty will help you see what you need to do next and how you need to grow. And let's be honest, sometimes we set out to do much more than we can do. We set unrealistic goals, thus the keeping to 3 goals for me. I've just learned that 3 works really well. But there are some days and some quarters where I slack off and I just don't do what I'm supposed to do for whatever reason. Some folks get frozen by fear. Sometimes you run out of funds. Cash flow is tough sometimes when we are running a creative business. And, sometimes other things happen in life. Hello, worldwide pandemic. And then there's also a childcare shortage. Whatever it is that happens, withhold judgment. Just write down what it is that you've done and the steps that you've taken to achieve your goals. All right. One thing to remember about this process is to be gracious. Don't judge yourself too harshly. The goal for this review is to be impartial and to act as if you are a third party, non-judgmental third party who's just writing out a review of what has happened in a person's life. So you do need to take that separation so that you don't get too hard on yourself. The goal for this is a review. It's not to beat yourself up. Okay, once you've outlined your 6 steps that you've taken, you're going to now write out the lessons you've learned. And we all know the path to our goals it's not always linear. You learn new lessons, you gain crucial information, say from a mentor or from a colleague. The whole point is, hopefully, fingers crossed, that you've moved an inch towards your goal every now and then. Just jot down what you've learned or talk about the unexpected things that have crossed your path since you started your year. Any lessons that you've learned, remember, it will help you clarify what you need to do to achieve your goal, and or it will help you know if you need to pivot. Next, I'd like you to write a quick list or paragraph, depending on your mood, on what are the 3 actions you need to take to bring you closer to achieving your quarter's goal, or heck, this year's goal. Whatever the actions are, just write them down, because let's face it, action is king. We can talk about executing on our goals, or we can create busy work, but until we make meaningful action, we won't get closer to our milestones. Whether or not you're doing this exercise, this review, in the first, second, or last quarter of the year, you have to execute on the tactics that will get you closer to your goal. What do I mean by tactics? I mean, what are the how? How are you going to make things happen? So let's say, an example, you need to make dinner and you need to go to the grocery store to get whatever the ingredients are for making dinner. How are you going to do that? Are you going to call an Uber? Are you going to get in your car? Are you going to walk to the grocery store? Are you going to get Uber Eats? Whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, you have to figure out how you're going to get closer to your goal. And then you have to do the things that will take you closer to your goal. Next, let's talk about some of the things that are getting in the way of you achieving your goals. If I'm being honest, at times I pick up bad habits that I must break in order to be successful in what I've set out to do. For example, one very bad habit I have is to have 3 or 4 notebooks with my notes in them all around the house. I'll pick a notebook, put it in my bag, and start writing notes about this and that. And that notebook will stay in my bag. And then I will pick up another notebook and start writing a to-do list here. And then I'll do that with my green notebook, and I'll do that with my red notebook. And at the end of the day, I have all these ideas that are scattered all over the place, and they're not in one place. So when it comes time to act on whatever it is I need to act on, sometimes my process becomes incomplete. I find that it's a really great idea, even during this review process, to take a few minutes to think about, how are you making your life harder? What are the things that you're doing that is standing in your way? And so from there, you try to find a solution and you stick with it. So in my case, I no longer have like several notebooks. I have one notebook, but I now have a notebook with me every now and then. But primarily, all my notes are kept in a Google Keep. And the one notebook I have is just to, maybe write out grocery list or do whatever it is, because I like to write things by hand. And once that notebook gets filled up, it goes in the notebook retirement center in a box in my closet. So not only is it important for you to think about some of the habits that you're willing to give up to get closer to your goals, it's also important to think about, to put a positive spin, if you will, because positive thinking goes a long way. When you use positive thinking, you're more appreciative. You set up, the good hormones in your brain, And it's important to think about your efforts, the work that you do to make big audacious goals. You need to take big and massive action. And in order to do that, you get tired. I don't know about you, I get tired sometimes. And it's nice to reflect back on what you have done. Because day in and day out, it's hard. But when you look back, it's humbling to know how much you've actually done. So keeping that positive spirit and thinking about the positive things that you've done, I find really helps in doing the review. After a little positive thinking, I find it helpful to think about the next year as well. And this is the place where I write, what are the 3 goals do I have for the following year? Sometimes, for example, when I do a first quarter check-in, I think about the following year and I simply rehash last year's goals with the caveat to improve by X percentage. And as we do a review for each, and as I do a review for each quarter and I start hitting my milestones, I start daydreaming about, ooh, what else could I do? How much better can things be? Ooh, how big can I actually dream? The last part of the review is to share your review with an accountability partner, or perhaps with a friend, a mentor, or a significant other. The goal is to fill that person in with what you've accomplished, and more importantly, to set a date on the calendar to follow up with them about what you've set out to do. We haven't talked about SMART systems as we've gone through the review, and usually through the process of creating the review, I tend to embed SMART goals in the review, but in a very not so rigorous way. And if you haven't heard of SMART goals, essentially whatever goals you have to be specific, they have to be measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Meaning that the goal should be very precise with no room for interpretation. An example of a specific goal is, if you were to say, I'm going to start running, that's not really specific. You might want to say, well, I'm going to start running once a week for 15 minutes. That's a very specific goal. In terms of a goal being measurable, the goal should be quantifiable and easy to track. So you know that, did you run for 15 minutes this week? Yes or no? Is the goal achievable? Is it achievable for you to run for 15 minutes a week? It may be not. It depends on you. Is the goal relevant? How does the goal tie to your greater, the greater whole? Is it that you are trying to be more fit? Is it that you're trying to train for a marathon? Whatever it is. Time bound. How long are you going to be doing this goal in terms of running for 15 minutes every week? Is it that you're going to do it for 6 months? Is it that you're going to do it for 3 months? Whatever it is. So you try to always come up with goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. In our case, we're just doing a review, which assumes that when you create your goal for your strategic plan for the year, your strategic plan will have SMART goals that are embedded in it, and we'll talk about that in November. But for now, just know that when you follow up with your accountability partner, you want to kind of put in some of that, those SMART goals in with that interaction, meaning that if you're following with your accountability partner, I want you to set a date on the calendar to follow up with them about what you set out to do. And at that meeting, you want to recap what you said you would do. So in terms of the habit, what are some bad habits that you picked up that you need to break? You need to have, it would be great for you to share with that person what that habit is and be very specific with that habit. And when have you set up a time for you to break that habit? Again, we're going to talk about SMART goals later on in November, but for now, it's just a good idea for you to think about being specific in your follow-up with your accountability partner. Last thing I want to say about the accountability partner, just be sure that whoever you are sharing your review with is someone who is very supportive, someone who's got your back, and someone who wants the best for you. It's not a great idea to get an accountability partner who has it in for you, because in some ways that person could potentially impede your growth instead of helping you get better and helping to push you and provide feedback that will get you towards your goal. Phew, that's it. So you'll find the download link to the worksheet in the show notes. Please take a look, have a go, fill it out, and send me a message at martine@martineseverin.com or slip into my DMs on IG at martine.severin so that you can tell me a little bit about how it went. This process does take me about 2 hours to do. I take my time because I have to review my notes from previous quarters, and I take my time to write everything out and to plan for the new year. I really would like to know what surprised you the most while completing the review. Please, as I said, send me a note, let me know how it went, and that is it. So bye for now. I'll be back in November with an episode on how to create a strategic plan for 2023. And my hope is that in doing this review, you'll get a little bit of a leg up in terms of seeing how far you've come in all that you've set out to do. And that we'll have more fun in November. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.